The work that we're doing here today is happening on the traditional territory of the Passamaquoddy First Nation, part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. The stewardship and connection to this land has existed time immemorial.
Welcome to Barnaby Head Trail. At 2.66 kilometers, you can hike this trail at New River Beach Provincial Park. I hope you enjoy our guided tour.
Although you may find lots of things that are interesting off of the trail, we encourage you to remain on the gravel when you're participating in this hike, just because a lot of the trees and wildlife around are very delicate, and we want to leave nature as it is.
If you're planning on hiking this trail, we always recommend that you have proper footwear as well as gear. As you can see, there are quite a few routes coming through the trail, so you want to make sure that you have sturdy shoes, either hiking sandals, hiking boots, or even sneakers will be just fine. Bring lots of layers because we are right next to the ocean and fog can come in at any time. And as always, you want to have a water bottle with you to prevent dehydration and make sure you're staying nice and healthy on the trail.
So here we are at the very first lookout spot that you will come to on Barnaby Head Trail, about 5 minutes into the walk, and there's the beautiful lookout spot of the intertidal zone.
So this is our second kind of look off just off the trail. This one doesn't have any fencing, so you just have to be careful coming along here. It is very open if you're with children or on your own, or just generally be careful. There are lots of roots, but this is a really great spot to stop and take a look at the intertidal life going on behind me here. You can see the tides coming up and going out, as well as different types of wildlife down on the beach. Sometimes you can spot loons, seals, piping plovers, and lots of different wildlife, so it's a great spot to stop.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So here we have a balsam fir, which is our provincial tree here in New Brunswick, and you can identify it by its flat needles.
So it's always worth looking at your feet and watching where you're going when you're going along the path, because even just a little bit outside of the regular trail, you can see really interesting plants like the ghost plant. So the reason that the ghost plant is white as opposed to green like everything else we see in the forest is because this plant doesn't produce chlorophyll. Instead, it has a symbiotic relationship with the fungi that grows on the root system of the trees that are nearby, and they exchange nutrients, water, so that it doesn't actually need to derive any energy or produce any energy using the sunshine. Instead, it's fully reliant on chemicals. Right now it's flowering, so you can see that there's a single flower at the very end, along with some scales on the side, which is very characteristic of the ghost plant. It'll be flowering between June and September, so you have some opportunity to see this before it finishes for the season. But even afterwards, once it's done, it's a perennial plant, so it'll turn kind of a brown, blackish color and still kind of keep this characteristic shape. So keep an eye out for those in the fall as well, and then since it's perennial, it'll come back next year. So lichens are a symbiotic relationship between an algae and a fungi, and this one in particular is making hair-like filaments that will grow off of either dead or alive trees within the forest.
So on this tree to my left, you see a lot of lichen that is called old man's beard. This is interesting because old man's beard only grows in areas where there's really high air quality.
So as you're walking down this trail, keep your eyes and ears open for different woodland creatures. So we just saw a couple of downy woodpeckers hanging out on this snag here, feeding on insects. One of the things that people might not realize about trees that have recently fallen or are still standing but are dead in the ecosystem are that they're very important to the greater area. They can provide habitat, food, and shelter for different insects, birds, and mammals that live in this area.
So by the coast where it gets really windy at times, you can see the effects in the vegetation around us. For example, these trees may be way older than they seem because the wind actually stunts their growth. Moreover, wind can take off their needles or their leaves at times, making them appear dead even though they aren't.
So welcome to the Untitled. Out of our hike today, this is one of the most ecologically diverse areas. You can imagine with the Bay of Fundy, our tides are some of the largest in the world. Actually, they are the largest in the world. So the animals that are here are especially tolerant. Hour to hour, we're having changes in moisture, wind, temperature. So depending on where you are on the beach, you're going to be finding very different things. That can be seaweeds, fish, crabs, snails, and it's going to be very, very different depending on where you are. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, right now we're standing on the boundary of a terrestrial environment and an aquatic environment. They're so very distinct that a lot of the organic material, some of the nutrients and materials that are found in the forest are not found in the ocean. So having these areas clean, thriving, is very important for that transfer of nutrients that comes all the way up and then wash down either from erosion, rainwater, storm events, things like that, to make sure all of that good stuff comes from on land into the ocean and helps our oceans stay healthy and happy. So it's about noontime, and as you can see, the fog is starting to lift. Fog plays a crucial part in coastal ecosystems because in the summertime in New Brunswick, obviously we've had a lot of heat and not a whole lot of rain, especially near the coast. But even on days where it's really warm and not quite as humid, the fog will roll in and then the trees and different plants in the forest are able to get a little bit of moisture before the sun shines and then lifts it for the day. So we're all very familiar about herbivores and the food chain in terrestrial environments, starting with grass, plants, leaves, all of that good stuff that supports the ecosystem. Of course, we don't have trees growing in the water, so algae is something that's very important. The rockweed, seaweed, all of the other species that you can see in the title. Anything that looks like a plant, but is basically growing in the water. Similar to the forest that we have around us, in the ocean, algae is responsible for a lot of the photosynthesis that happens in the water, taking carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere and turning it into oxygen. If we're talking about biomass, algae is actually more important in terms of greenhouse gas uptake and removal than all of our forests.
You can see lots of different varieties of periwinkle, as you can see on this rock and along this beach. Periwinkle are a form of sea slug. We have several different kinds here: common, rough, spotted, and many more. They were first journaled about on the East Coast in 1840, but of course they've been seen across the world and in lots of different varieties since then. They're also a very good indicator of acidity levels in the ocean. So they are a great little contributor to our beaches and our ecosystem. So sea slugs also are important to our ecosystem because they are a very easy source of prey, as they don't move quickly and tend to stay in the same areas even after the tide goes out. So they're often eaten by coastal seabirds, crabs, and other aquatic creatures. So here we have arrived in the bog, and you might be wondering what lives in a bog. So plants which grow on the wet, thin soil of the bog include insect-eating plants like the pitcher plant and the sundew plant. Folks often come to bogs like this to calve because most likely predators do not visit these bogs, such as bears and coyotes, so they're relatively safe here, and the sphagnum moss provides a nice, cool, soft bed for them to rest. Yeah, it's not probably sideways. Thank you so much for joining us on our guided nature hike today at the Barnaby Head Trail at New River Beach. We hope you come and check out this beautiful trail for yourself, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions about any of the wildlife that you saw today, and we will see you next time.